Welcome back. Every system we've governed, tested, and watched has been assuming, mostly, an honest world. This chapter drops that assumption completely. AI systems are targets of criminals, competitors, insiders, and the merely curious, and they present attack surfaces that traditional security programs were never designed to see. This is the security chapter, and it's essential AAIA territory. Here's our focus map. First, the attacks on the model's mind. Data poisoning, evasion, and backdoors corrupting what the model learns. Then, model inversion, extraction, and IP theft, stealing what it knows. Prompt injection and system prompt manipulation, hijacking what it does. And membership inference, leaking who it learned from. Several of these will feel familiar from earlier chapters. Now they get their full security treatment. Second, the attacks through the ecosystem. Supply chain risks from open source dependencies and shadow AI, and the generative era risk trio, deepfakes, hallucinations weaponized, and automation bias exploited. Third, the defenses. Access controls for models, APIs, training data, and registries, identity and access management audits adapted for AI environments, and the protective layer, guardrails, safety layers, and vulnerability scanning built for machine learning. And fourth, the step back, evaluating the maturity of the whole threat and vulnerability management program, because individual controls matter less than the system that maintains them. Attackers have read the AI papers. Your security team may not have. Subscribe if you haven't, and let's find out who's at the door. Let's begin with attacks on the model's education. Three siblings that exploit the same fundamental truth: a model is what it learned. Data poisoning, evasion, and backdoors. And by the end, you'll see why we planted the defensive controls back in Chapter 10. Data poisoning first, the attack we previewed in the tampering lesson. The adversary corrupts training data so the model learns wrong lessons. And remember the strategic logic. Attacking the food supply beats attacking the animal. Flip a few thousand fraud labels to legitimate, and the model learns to wave that fraud pattern through, permanently, invisibly, wearing its normal accuracy on every dashboard. Poisoning routes are broader than insiders. Any system that learns from user-generated or web-collected data ingests from the public. Spam filters trained on user reports, recommendation systems learning from clicks, models retraining on scraped content. Attackers can feed all of them patiently. And connect to Chapter 3's feedback loops. Continuous retraining pipelines are continuous poisoning opportunities. Every automated retrain is an unlocked kitchen door. Evasion is the sibling that attacks at inference time. No access to training needed. The model is already deployed, and the attacker crafts inputs that slide past it. The adversarial examples from last chapter's testing lesson, now with criminal intent. Fraudsters structuring transactions just under learned boundaries. Malware authors perturbing files until classifiers see them as benign. Spam rewritten until filters relax. The defining feature? The model isn't changed at all. It's simply navigated, which is why evasion leaves so little trace and why adversarial robustness testing was worth its own lesson. Backdoors are the most sinister blend. The attacker poisons training so the model behaves perfectly except when it sees a specific trigger, a particular pattern, phrase, or pixel arrangement, whereupon it produces the attacker's chosen output. Think of a sleeper agent, loyal for years, activated by a code word. Backdoors can arrive through poisoned data or, remember the supply chain lesson coming shortly, pre-installed inside downloaded pre-trained models. And they're brutally hard to detect because ordinary testing never presents the trigger. Last lesson attacked what the model learns. This one steals what the model knows and what the model is. Model inversion, model extraction, and the broader IP theft picture. Three ways your organization's crown jewels walk out through the front door, one API call at a time. Model inversion you met in Chapter 8, so a quick security-flavored recap. The attacker uses the model's outputs to reconstruct its training data, running the model backwards until faces, records, or memorized text emerge. In the privacy chapter, this was a data protection catastrophe. In the security chapter, notice what it also is: an attack requiring nothing but query access, no breach, no malware, just patient interrogation of a public facing endpoint. Hold that thought, it's today's theme. Model extraction is the theft of the model itself. Here's the elegant, uncomfortable mechanics. An attacker queries your model API systematically, records the input-output pairs, and trains their own substitute model on those pairs, effectively distilling your model's knowledge into their copy. Given enough queries, the clone approximates the original's behavior without ever touching your infrastructure. Why does this matter commercially? Think about what a production model represents: years of proprietary data, feature engineering craft, and tuning investment. Remember everything chapters 10 and 11 documented. Extraction converts all of it into a competitor's shortcut. And there's a security compounder. The stolen clone becomes an attack laboratory. The adversary can probe their copy offline to craft evasion attacks against your original. Unlimited practice swings, invisible to your monitoring. The wider IP theft picture adds the mundane routes that steal more in practice than the clever ones. Departing employees carrying model artifacts and training datasets, overshared cloud storage, model files sitting unprotected in registries and buckets. Remember, Chapter 8 taught us the model file is a compressed copy of its training data, so stealing the artifact steals the data too. And vendors or partners with contractual access and casual discipline. Now the defensive audit lens. And notice how the controls converge. Rate limiting and query monitoring on model APIs. Extraction requires volume. Volume is detectable. Ask whether anyone watches for systematic querying patterns. Output discipline. Returning labels rather than full probability vectors makes extraction and inversion harder, a design choice with security consequences. Watermarking and fingerprinting techniques that help prove a clone's ancestry. And the classical layer, access controls on artifacts and registries. Lever processes that remember models are assets, and contracts that treat model access as the sensitive grant it is, all of which we formalize 2 lessons from now. We tested prompt injection in Chapter 14. Now let's treat it as what it fully is: the defining security vulnerability of the generative AI era, and go deeper into why it's so hard to fix and what a defensible posture looks like. First, why injection works at all, the root cause. Traditional computing separates instructions from data. Code is code, input is input. Language models dissolve that boundary. Everything arrives as text in one stream: the system prompt, the user's message, the retrieved document, the email being summarized, and the model has no rigorous way to know which words are commands and which are content. That's why injection isn't a bug to patch, but a structural property to manage. The model is, in a sense, a very capable employee who believes everything they read. Now escalate the stakes with modern architecture. Today's AI systems aren't just chatbots, they're agents with tools, reading email, querying databases, calling APIs, executing workflows. Remember MCP-style integrations and downstream dependency chains from Chapter 2. Inject instructions into content such as system processes, and you're not manipulating a conversation, you're potentially commanding actions. Send this data here, approve that request, fetch this URL. Indirect injection makes it wormable. A poisoned web page or document infects any AI that reads it. And system prompt manipulation adds the governance wound. Attackers extracting or overriding the hidden prompt, which, remember Chapter 2, is the application's policy engine. Your acceptable use rules, your refusal boundaries, your persona, exposed or rewritten. So what does defense in depth look like, since no single fix exists? Input side, filtering and pattern detection on incoming content, treating retrieved and third-party content as untrusted by default. Privilege side, and this is the big one, least privilege for the model itself. An AI that can read email but not send it, query the database but not modify it, limits what any successful injection can do. The blast radius thinking from Chapter 4 applied to model permissions. Output side, guardrail layers screening responses and, critically, human confirmation gates before consequential actions. And detection, logging every tool call the model makes. Remember Chapter 13's logging anatomy, so anomalous action patterns surface. The audit questions follow the layers. What can this model actually do? Demand the tool and permission inventory. Most teams have never written it down. What content sources does it ingest? Each one is an injection channel. Where are the human gates before irreversible actions? And when was injection resistance last tested? Chapter 14's dated evidence, because the attack library evolves monthly. This lesson completes a bridge we built in Chapter 8, membership inference and training data leakage, revisited from the security side. There we asked what these attacks mean for privacy compliance. Here we ask the operational questions: who attacks, why, how you detect it, and what reduces the exposure. Same vulnerability, different audit lens, and the exam expects you to hold both. Quick mechanics refresher. Membership inference determines whether a specific record was in the training set, exploiting the model's subtle overconfidence on data it has seen. The student recognizing a practice question. Training data leakage is the broader family. Models memorizing and regurgitating fragments of training content, extractable through patient prompting. Remember, researchers pulling names, contact details, and verbatim passages from language models. Now, the security framing, start with the adversary model. Who actually runs these attacks? Regulators and researchers, demonstrating your exposure publicly. Reputational and compliance consequences arriving via conference paper. Litigants, membership inference as evidence gathering, proving their data trained your model without consent. Connect to Chapter 10's provenance battles. Competitors, learning what data sources power your product. And blackmail adjacent actors where training data is sensitive. Remember, confirming someone's record was in a clinic's dataset is itself the harm. Then the exposure amplifiers your audit should hunt. Overfitting, the more a model memorizes, the more it leaks. So Chapter 3's generalization discipline is quietly a security control. Small or unique training populations, rare records, are memorized more distinctly. Fine-tuning on confidential data, Chapter 2's caution now armed, your data baked into weights that may sit with a vendor. And unlimited query access. These attacks need volume, which returns us to rate limiting and query monitoring from the extraction lesson. The same defensive muscle protects against both. Mitigations to know by name. Differential privacy in training, the mathematical noise from Chapter 8, directly degrading membership signals. Regularization and deduplication of training data. Memorization loves repeated records. Output filtering, catching verbatim regurgitation. And the testing discipline, privacy attack testing as part of pre-deployment validation for models trained on personal or confidential data. Ask for the memorization. Audit by date and model version. Chapter 14's evidence standards apply in full. Chapter 6 gave us the supply chain fundamentals, the AI bill of materials, poisoned public models, license traps, the log4j lesson replayed with models. Today we complete the picture with the security operations view and give full treatment to the supply chain's unruliest member, shadow AI. First, the security depth on dependencies. Beyond the risks we catalogued, add the operational attack patterns your security team should recognize. Typo squatting and namespace attacks on package and model repositories. Malicious uploads named one character away from popular libraries. Developers install them by fingertip error. Compromised maintainer accounts pushing poisoned updates into legitimate projects. Your pipeline pulls the new version automatically. Remember, automated pipelines extend trust automatically. Unsafe model formats. Some serialization formats execute code on load, so downloading a model can mean running a stranger's program. Ask whether the organization restricts formats and scans artifacts before loading. and dependency confusion between internal and public package names. The defensive pattern for all of these: curated internal registries, teams pull from a vetted internal mirror rather than the open internet, integrity verification by hash and signature, and pipeline scanning, which we'll formalize in the guardrails lesson. Your audit test remains the beautiful one from Chapter 6. Show me the list. Then add the security follow-up. Show me what happens between the internet and production. Every step of vetting or its absence. Now, shadow AI, properly defined. AI adoption outside governance's sight. It arrives in three escalating forms. Individual shadow AI, employees using unapproved public tools, pasting who knows what into them. Chapter 5's acceptable use battle. Departmental shadow AI, business units subscribing to AI-powered SaaS on a corporate card. No security review, no DPIA, no inventory entry. Remember, procurement never saw it, so vendor management never governed it. And embedded shadow AI, the subtlest. AI features switching on inside software you already own. Your CRM quietly gains a generative assistant in a routine update, and suddenly customer data flows through a model nobody assessed. Why is shadow AI a supply chain issue? Because every instance is an unvetted vendor relationship. Data flowing to third parties under terms nobody read, with none of Chapter 6's contractual protections. Today's lesson covers three generative era risks that share a disturbing property. They attack human perception and judgment rather than systems. Deepfakes weaponize synthetic media, hallucinations weaponize fluency, and automation bias is the human vulnerability both of them exploit. Let's take them as the connected story they are. Deepfakes first. Synthetic audio, video, and images convincing enough to impersonate real people. The business attack patterns are no longer hypothetical, they are case files. Voice cloning powering CEO fraud. The finance officer receives a call. The voice is unmistakably the chief executive's. Urgent, confidential transfer, and the money moves. There are now well-documented cases of exactly this, including video conference variants where an employee joined a call full of deep-faked colleagues and authorized multi-million-dollar payments. Notice what the attack actually defeated: not a firewall, but the oldest authentication in business, recognizing a familiar voice and face. The defensive translation: callback verification through independent channels for payment and credential changes, code words for executive requests, and payment controls that no single voice, however convincing, can bypass. Classic segregation of duties suddenly fashionable again. And add the inbound dimension: deepfake documents and identities attacking your KYC and onboarding. Ask whether identity verification vendors test against synthetic media. Hallucinations you know thoroughly, so here's the security reframe. Hallucination becomes a risk multiplier when organizations wire generative outputs into decisions and communications without verification layers. The invented court citations, the confident wrong policy answer delivered to a customer in your brand's voice. Remember, the airline held liable for its chatbot's invented refund policy. The control question is placement. Where in each workflow does verified truth get checked before the fluent text ships? Automation bias is the thread joining everything. The documented human tendency to overtrust machine outputs. Chapter 13's oversight decay, now recognized as an attack surface. Deepfakes exploit our trust in familiar media. Hallucinations exploit our trust in fluent text, and both exploit organizational cultures where questioning the system is friction. The defenses are partly technical: provenance and watermarking standards for media, groundedness checks for text, but substantially human and procedural. Training that includes synthetic media awareness. Remember Chapter 13's awareness auditing. Verification rituals that survive urgency, and metrics watching whether humans ever actually disagree with the machine. After 8 lessons of attacks, we turn fully to defense, and we start with the oldest control family in security: access control, applied to the newest asset class. Models, APs, training data, and registries each need the who can do what treatment. And today, we build the map your audits will follow. Start with the inventory of what needs protecting, because AI environments hold more sensitive objects than most access programs realize. The model artifacts themselves, remember, a compressed copy of training data and a theft-worthy IP asset, twice valuable, twice targeted. The training data stores and feature stores. Chapter 10's tampering lesson. Poisoning begins with right access. The model registry. Chapter 11's authoritative catalog. Whoever controls it controls what production believes is approved. The inference AP is the front door for extraction, inversion, and abuse. The pipelines and their configuration. Chapter 12. The person who controls the pipeline controls everything it deploys. And the prompts and guardrail configurations. The policy engines. Editable text with production consequences. Now the control principles translated. Least privilege, and here's the AI-specific bite. Data scientists genuinely need broad data access to explore, so mature organizations separate environments. Generous access to de-identified exploration data, tightly controlled access to production training data and artifacts, the exploration playground, and the production vault. Different keys, different logging. Separation of duties. Chapter 11's lesson now enforced through permissions. The builder cannot approve. The approver cannot deploy. The pipeline modifier cannot be the sole beneficiary of its gates. Check it in the access system, not the org chart. Write versus read discipline. Read access to training data is a privacy exposure. Write access is a poisoning capability. They deserve different scrutiny. And label editing rights deserve the most of all. Remember, who can modify labels, and does anyone review it? And non-human identities, the quiet giant. Service accounts and pipeline credentials often hold the broadest rights in the entire environment, with no owner, no rotation, and no review. Ask for the service account inventory first. It's where the findings cluster. The API layer adds its own stack. Authentication on every model endpoint. No anonymous inference for sensitive models. Authorization scoped by consumer. Remember, downstream dependency chains. Each consumer should reach only its models. Rate limiting as the anti-extraction control from earlier. And full query logging feeding the monitoring we built in Chapter 13. Your fieldwork sequence. Pick one high-tier model and walk the objects, who can read the artifact, write the training data, edit the registry entry, modify the pipeline, change the prompt, and call the API, names, not roles, with dates of last review. That single walk, done honestly, previews the entire next lesson, because access controls are only as good as the identity program managing them, and that's exactly where we go now. Last lesson mapped what needs protecting. This lesson audits the machinery that grants, tracks, and revokes the keys, identity and access management, IAM, in AI environments. You likely know IAM auditing from general IT, so I'll focus on where AI bends the familiar program and give you the field sequence I actually run. Start with the lifecycle you already know, joiner, mover, lever, and stress test it against AI realities. Joiners. Is there a defined access model for AI roles at all? Data scientist, ML engineer, model validator, reviewer, or does each arrival get access cloned from a colleague? Cloning is how privilege accumulates like sediment. Movers, the chronic one, the data scientist who moved to a product role 3 reorganizations ago and still holds right access to training data. Access recertification must actually cover AI resources. Pull the last review and check whether model registries, feature stores, and pipelines were even in scope. They are frequently invisible to the standard recertification tooling. Levers. And here AI adds teeth. Remember the IP theft lesson. Model artifacts and datasets are portable crown jewels, so lever processes for AI staff should be prompt and complete. Test it. Sample recent levers and check revocation timestamps across every AI system, including the SaaS tools and notebook platforms that live outside central IAM. Now the AI-specific expansions. Non-human identities, Promised last lesson, now the centerpiece. Pipeline service accounts, API keys, tool credentials held by agents. Remember, we've built AI systems that themselves hold credentials and take actions. Each needs an owner, a scope, rotation, and monitoring. And the audit reality is that many were created in a sprint and documented nowhere. The orphan account with God rights is this decade's default finding. Privileged access. Who holds administrative power over the AI platforms themselves? The MLOps admin who can alter any pipeline is the new domain admin. Expect break glass procedures, session logging, and just-in-time elevation rather than standing power. Federation sprawl. AI work scatters across cloud consoles, notebook services, vendor platforms, and API dashboards. Ask how many identity systems govern the AI estate. Every disconnected one is a place revocation forgets. Then the evidence layer, access logging and its review. Granting is half the control. Watching usage is the other half. Are access logs from model registries, data stores, and admin consoles collected, retained per Chapter 13 standards, and actually reviewed? Sample an unusual access event and ask who noticed. Today we build the protective architecture around the model. Guardrails, safety layers, and vulnerability scanning adapted for machine learning. Think of this as the defense in-depth lesson, because the honest premise of everything we've studied is that the model itself cannot be fully trusted, so we wrap it. Guardrails first, the runtime checkpoints on a model's inputs and outputs. Input guardrails screen what reaches the model. Injection pattern detection, off-topic filtering, personal data detection stopping sensitive content from entering prompts. Remember, Chapter 8, prompts become logs, become liabilities. Output guardrails screen what leaves, toxicity and safety classifiers, personal data leak detection, catching regurgitation, groundedness checks for RAG systems, flagging answers unsupported by retrieved documents, are hallucination control, and format or policy validators. Does this response make commitments the business never authorized? Remember, the airline's chatbot. 2 audit insights elevate this from checklist to craft. First, guardrails are often models themselves, so everything this course demands of models applies to them. Versioning, testing, monitoring, false negative rates. Remember Chapter 7, the controls failures are your exposure. Ask for the guardrail's own performance evidence. Second, guardrail configuration is production configuration. Changes belong under Chapter 12's change control, and yes, people tweak them casually. Check the reconciliation. Safety layers widen the frame beyond content screening, the architectural protections. Least privileged tool access from the injection lesson. Human confirmation gates before consequential actions. Rate and spend limits bounding what a misbehaving or hijacked system can do per hour. Kill switches and containment modes from Chapter 12 standing ready. And isolation. Models processing untrusted content running with minimal reach. The pattern to audit. Layered independence. No single layer's failure should be sufficient for harm. Walk one harm scenario through the layers and count what must fail simultaneously. Vulnerability scanning for AI, the proactive sweep. And it has 3 distinct scopes teams routinely conflate. Classical scanning of the AI infrastructure, the servers, containers, and frameworks. Remember, ML libraries carry CVs like all software, and notebook platforms are famously soft. Dependency and artifact scanning, the supply chain lesson operationalized. Licenses, known vulnerable packages, unsafe model formats, malicious artifacts running inside the pipeline before anything reaches production. And AI-specific security testing, the adversarial battery from Chapter 14. Injection suites, jailbreak libraries, extraction probes run on a cadence because the attack landscape mutates monthly. Ask which of the 3 scopes exist, their coverage, and their finding to fix pipeline. Unremediated scan results are the security version of the untracked audit finding.